Hey, Dee, I think you might have enticed a few people to buy a few more daylilies from those Instagram posts you had all last week.
Well, I was at the National Daylily Convention in Asheville, North Carolina.
No kidding. You know which one I like the best?
Porky the Pig.
That one was hilarious because that daylily was the exact color of a pig,
Yeah,
a pink pig.
yeah, it's really hard to get a UF in that coloration, so that was pretty cool.
That is cool. And for our listeners, UF is unusual form.
Yes, unusual form. Sorry.
Yeah, you've been slinging around daylily talk with all those people that knew what they were talking about. Anyway, let's move on to this week's episode. Welcome to the Gardenangelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about 1/3 of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on several acres out in the country, too darn many.
We call ourselves Gardenangelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
Yes, we do, and we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, where, when. Let's move on to this week's episode. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, Dee.
How does your garden grow?
You notice I got a big old smile on my face today because we got almost an inch of rain on Friday. Greatly improved the mood of the garden, greatly improved the mood of the gardener. And so it's been wonderful. I'm picking squash, cucumbers, a few little peppers. You know, you got to get those few little peppers off so the plant knows it's got to keep producing. It's not done. Completely weeded the vegetable garden over the weekend, so it looks really pretty spiffy right now. Those weeds were mine to pull so easy after the rain. Everything's looking good except my green beans are terrible. But guess what else I did?
What?
I went around and I say harvested, but I collected all kinds of seeds from my columbine and the ones I have that started off as Tower Blue and Tower Pink. Because I had a listener from Queens, New York who had emailed me and said, can you save some seeds? Because I can't find these seeds for Tower Blue. And I'm like, well, after all these years, I'm not sure that they're actually Tower Blue, but I will save them. So I saved blue, pink, dark purple, and then some that I didn't tag were mixed. Guess what else I did with my seeds?
What?
I emailed Nan Andra at Hayfield and said, hey, Nan, would you like some columbine seeds? She was delighted. So I sent her some seeds, and in exchange, she sent me back Viola Freckles seeds. Isn't that exciting?
Nice.
It is nice.
Good job. Well, I collected some seeds too. Actually, I sprinkled them out in the garden. My nigella is finished, and what is the common name of nigella? Love and a mist.
Love and a mist.
Love and a mist. Used to not be able to grow it, but I found a spot it likes, and I sprinkled the seed all around, and so I have nigella seeds. There'll be more nigella coming up.
Pretty good. What else going on in your garden there in Oklahoma?
I think I have, things are going okay, and it looks pretty good. And I did a video this morning on Instagram of just the back garden because I walked around this morning, and considering how hot it's been, I'm telling you that drip irrigation works. It was in the hundreds the whole time I was out of town, and I harvested tomatoes and shishito peppers yesterday, and I watered the pelargoniums that are on the Pelargonium Theater up against the north side of the garage, and they're doing fine. But the begonias I bought early in the season may be casualties of my trip.
Oh.
Nobody waters like the gardener, right? I mean,
No.
You can hire people, including your youngest daughter. Most of those are gone, but she did her best. And let's see, I think maybe they needed to be in the shade, which if I had been here, I'd have moved them into the shade and watered them. But she doesn't know to do that. That's okay.
That's okay. I've got some begonias, and I will have to put a link in the show notes, but it was seeds that All America Selection sent us, National Garden Bureau. And I was like, I've never grown begonias from seed. Those things look amazing, and they're just starting to flower. And so I will put a link in our show notes because I was skeptical that I could grow begonias from seed, but they look marvelous. They look marvelous, Dee.
And let me just say, some of my begonias look great. It's just these new ones. They needed a little more shade than she gave them, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah, that's
You want
okay.
to do the first quote?
It's your fault for putting them in the sun in the first place, Dee.
Well, they liked the sun until it got to be 103 and 104. There you go.
Yeah, I think even I reached 100 one day last week, but that's enough. Let's do a quote and talk about flowers. The lovely flowers embarrass me. They make me regret I am not a bee. And that could only be Emily Dickinson.
Yeah, that's Emily Dickinson for sure. So we are talking about our flower today, and no, it's not daylilies. Although I may write a post about daylilies in the convention because that was fun. We are actually talking about plants that survive the long, hot summer. And we're going to link to an article that is in the Muskogee Phoenix newspaper. And Muskogee is a town in Oklahoma, and it still has a really good gardening column in the Muskogee Phoenix. And let me just say, Muskogee is south and east of where I live. So a little bit south and east. It's over by Kiowa. And it's actually named after the Muskogee tribe, which has also been called the Creek tribe, but they really like to go by Muskogee. It's not spelled the same, though. Anyway, there's nothing like a long, hot summer to show you which plants are happy and can take the heat, and those which, as you wrote here, beg for mercy and shrivel up to nothing. So tell us about your experience, Carol.
So I went around in my garden, and I will tell you that asters and goldenrod, of course, they're not going to flower for a while, but they look good. Sunflowers, big tall ones that I just let come up from seed from last year's big tall one. They look marvelous. The zinnias are great. The marigolds are wonderful. Amsonia, I cut that baby back by half, and it's already grown half as much again. Doing great.
Yeah,
Baptisias are standing tall. Of course, they're not in bloom right now, but they are standing tall. And the epimediums, they laugh at all the dryness. They think this is perfect. And even the new Gara that I bought this spring, planted over there by the garage where the pink garden is. I kind of don't get over there to water very often. And I went over there and they're like waving in the wind thinking, woohoo, life is good.
Well, Gara is a native prairie plant, so that does not surprise me a bit.
No. Now, I'll tell you what, the heucheras, they're like sunburnt.
Yeah.
And wild ginger that I have kind of in a couple of spots, one spot is just flat to the ground, and it'll come back from the roots next year, but it just melts. But you know what else is standing tall?
What?
The Orient pet lilies. They look great.
Yeah.
They're like not even blinking about this dryness. So there's a lot of good stuff going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff going on. I would say here, my driest bed is the one against the garage, and the 4 o'clocks, the salmon sunset 4 o'clocks that I've had for years that just come back now, they're doing great. The Orient pet lily is doing great. Scheherazade, cannas are doing great, blooming. It's time to cut them back again. I was going to ask you about trilliums. How do trilliums do in the heat? I don't grow those yet.
So trillium to me is a spring ephemeral, and so it would naturally die back.
So it goes back underground?
Yeah, they've all naturally died back by now, so I think they'll be fine. I'm not worried about them.
I think they'll be fine too. I was also going to say that baptisia, sometimes in my garden, when it gets really hot, it dries back to the ground too. It just goes back underground.
That's a big plant to do that, but okay.
Yeah, well, they do sometimes. And sometimes they get eaten so badly by caterpillars that they just look really, really bad, and you cut them all the way to the ground then. And if you do that, they still come roaring back in the spring. So I just wanted to tell people, if your baptisia has gone away and looks dead, you can cut that off and it won't hurt anything. So my experience is, well, first of all, almost everything you mentioned is a prairie plant except the epimediums. Yep. Epimediums grow in the shade, and they're actually aren't they from Asia or somewhere?
Probably, I think.
I didn't study it.
Eurasia, somewhere in there. I don't know.
Who knows? Okay, so it doesn't matter. But most of these are American prairie plants. And I think that's why they're laughing at the heat, because the American prairies were hot mothers in the summer.
Now, one plant that's not happy with the dryness
Yeah.
is the Joe Pie weed. My little
Oh,
Joe.
yeah, they don't.
Little Joe would like a little bit wetter than it is. And I thought, there's a couple hanging baskets near there. I need to give little Joe a little water.
Yeah, it will definitely wilt in the heat. I also noticed that perennial hibiscus loves this kind of weather, but even
It does?
Yes, and even my Muy Grande perennial hibiscus yesterday was looking a little wilty mid-afternoon, but then the drip irrigation gave it just a little bit of water, and it was fine. So it does need more water than, say, some of these other things. Goldenrod here, asters, stupid Rebecca Goldsturm laughs at this weather and says, yes.
It does and it doesn't.
Really? In my house, it does.
Well, I have some that's in like the sun and it's doing pretty good. But I have some that there's a maple tree that's competing with it. And I think the maple tree was sucking up all the water, and the Goldstern was like, some for us, please, some for us, please. But after the rain, it popped right back up, and I'm like, oh, you're tougher than you look.
And then there's autumnal sneezeweed,
Achoo!
which handles this. It really doesn't make people sneeze.
I know, I just had to
I know,
do
I'm
that.
just telling our listeners, don't not buy it because you think.
Don't listen to Carol.
And then there's sunflowers and lavender.
Oh, yeah.
And borage.
Yeah, lavender.
And basil. All that stuff does great.
My borage was huge when I was weeding, and I thought, you know what? You're getting whacked back because you're in the path, and you're going to self-sow all over.
You're out of control.
That's when you're out of control. You're getting whacked back, and you're going to make good compost.
There you go.
Thank you.
So
there are tons of drought-tolerant plants, and if you just kind of look around this time of year, and even if you don't have them in your garden, go look around and see what's doing well. But don't look at go to public gardens, but remember they do water pretty regularly.
Well, and I water
go around.
regularly because I live
you do.
in the country in Oklahoma, and you have to. But I water with drip so that I don't waste my water, because you don't want to waste water. So let's talk just briefly about what the article said. They talked about hardy plumbago, which, that does okay here. It likes some shade. Shasta daisy, coneflowers, which are echinacea, daylilies. Okay, I'm going to say this about daylilies. When it gets this hot, the dormant daylilies, because daylilies come in dormant, semi-evergreen, and evergreen, okay? The dormant ones try to go underground again. They're like, we're out of here. And they start to shrink down and their leaves turn brown. And that's when people start writing me and saying, that's the thing I hate about daylilies. Well, it's the dormant ones that do that the worst. And
that's all of mine.
I just don't care. I just pull off the dead leaves and go on, because I know it's going to come roaring back in the spring. Nothing's going to look good in 100-degree heat. And the truth is, you aren't out there anyway, so it doesn't matter. All right, so rosemary, autumn sage, verbena. I wonder what verbena they're talking about.
I'm thinking about I don't know.
I don't know which one they're talking about. They're talking about spreading verbena or what, but it doesn't matter. They say verbena. And then some annual selections that this author picked were coxcomb, firebush, cosmos, sunflower, lantana, marigolds, amaranth, Mexican bush sage, and zinnia. I would say yes to all of those.
I would agree.
And then there's a quote in here about drought-tolerant plants are those with built-in features to help minimize water loss and maximize water uptake. So if you guys want to read this, we're going to link to it because we're not going to read it all for you. But there's some really good information in here. Oh, also silvery plants. Plants that look like silver. They have little hairs on them, and they tend to be very, very drought tolerant.
That is true. Like my lamb's ear. Lamb's ear doesn't need water.
No, lamb's ear doesn't need water. In fact, it would just as soon you not water it, pretty much, right?
Exactly.
So I did write in here, nothing survives if you don't water it. So the point being that if it's especially a new established plant, it's going to need water. And when we get into these temperatures, it's going to need water. But you don't want to overwater because then you cause root rot. So It's more complicated than people
Right.
realize.
And the irony, Dee, last week I wrote an article for Family Handyman. I'll link to it. 10 signs that you're overwatering. And I'm laughing because it was before it rained. And I'm like, chances of me overwatering right now, pretty slim. But
Yeah, I don't think you can water
was
stuff
fun.
enough. So, do you want to move on to the next quote?
I do want you to read that next quote.
If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. Dale Carnegie. Yeah, I would never advise anybody to kick over a beehive. It's going to be a bad day. That reminds me of a story real quick. You want to hear it?
I do.
I was in this garden. It was the last garden of the last day, and it was a sweet little 4-square garden in the back. And there were way too many people tromping through it. I felt sorry for this guy because he had turf grass, you know, the really sweet turf grass. Yeah, he don't have it now. Anyway, I turned and looked, and he was handing out drinks because it was really hot and humid there. I look up on the top of his little garden shed or something, and there are beehives up there. There are 2 beehives. And I was like, why are his beehives up there? And I look at him. About that time, somebody asked him, and it's because he has bears in his neighborhood.
Oh.
Yeah. And I just said, oh, and I said, I'm a beekeeper. And he goes, well, I said, how do you, go and check your hives, inspect your hives? And he said, I get on a ladder. He gets on a ladder. And I thought, oh, I could not get on a ladder and inspect my beehives because if I got stung, I might fall off the ladder, but he's a braver man than I. Anyway, I thought that was really interesting. And he said, yeah, bears wander through our neighborhood. In Asheville, they have bears in downtown.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been there, but yes, I can see a bear wandering down the street.
Yeah, there was a sign at there was a sign inside our hotel, and it said, basically, if you see bears, don't go up to them and pet them because they're wild.
Exactly. Yeah. They're not, just because they're in the city doesn't mean they've been tamed.
No, in fact, they're not. All right, do you want to talk about our veggie for a minute?
Yes. So I saw this. It actually came across on an email. So hat tip to John Sheeper's Kitchen Garden Seeds. I think that's what they're called.
Yes.
Anyway, they said, and they're right, if you're going to grow fall kale or cabbage or broccoli or cauliflower, you should start seeds indoors now under lights, just like it was early spring, and then give your little seedlings a chance to grow for 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks, harden them off, and then when things start to cool down, you can plunk those babies right down in your garden. And I'm sitting here thinking, because I probably am insane, I've never really gotten into growing these in the fall. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm going to give it a try this year because my green beans are terrible. Actually, I think I'm going to give it a try because by the time the seedlings are ready, I will have probably pulled out the corn, and that will be a big patch that I could put in the garden. And I'll probably cover it with the frost cloth to keep the butterflies off of it.
Yep, those cute little cabbage butterflies.
Oh, they're so cute.
They are beautiful little butterflies. They're just unfortunately voracious caterpillars.
Yes. So I'm going to in the next week or so, I'm going to actually pull out all my seed starting stuff and all these seeds I have that I'm like, oh, I'm never growing that. It's just like begonias. I'm now suddenly going to grow it from seed and see how it does.
There you go. I think you should do it. So she put in here, Dee says, and I wrote, I probably won't because I've got my hands full because I bought 20 daylilies.
Dee Nash, you should be.
Actually, that's not fair. I bought 10, and then they give you bus plants. So every day you're on a bus, you get 2 plants. Well, my husband went with me, so I got 4 plants, which is great because they're the same plant. And so that means I got 4 fans instead of 2. But I've still got to plant all these babies and keep them alive. So I am not going to be planting a fall garden. I'm just not.
So are you going to plant them directly in the garden now, or are you going to plant them
absolutely
in containers?
Not. No. I'll put them in containers right now because if you planted them in the garden right now, there is no way you could keep them alive. They rot so easy when it's this hot. because the water, they have those little fibrous roots that store water, and they will just rot away, and they're way too expensive to rot away. So I will be putting them in pots because they get excellent drainage, sticking them behind my Japanese maple on the north side of the house, tag them all, have them watered, and then in September, I'll pot them into the ground, and they'll just take off.
Perfect. Perfect. I can't believe I knew you bought a bunch of those.
I showed you the list.
You said you were going to have to pare it back, and I'm like, holy cow.
I didn't pare it back.
I
added 2 more. I did not pare it back.
Did you get Porky the Pig?
I did not buy Porky the Pig. I should buy it for you.
I wanted Porky the Pig. You know, I live not far from a Daylily place, and they're open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think this weekend I should go down there and ask if they have Porky the Pig.
Yeah, I don't know if Porky the Pig was a dormant or not, so I don't know. I didn't look it up.
That's all. I think all of our daylilies here in my zone are dormants.
They should be.
They all die back to the ground.
Yeah. Well, ours all die back to the ground. We're just not as cold as you are, so we're able to get away with evergreens and semi-evergreens. So do you want to do the next quote?
I do. Handle a book as a bee does a flower. Extract its sweetness, but do not damage it. John Muir. I love that.
That's beautiful.
That should be on a bookmark.
That's beautiful. So on our bookshelf, I see. So we did 2 different books. I didn't get to read the first one because I was out of town and it came to my library, but you didn't love it.
I started to read it, and you know what? It's just, like books are certain moods you have to be in. Mm-hmm. I just wasn't in the mood for this book. And so do we even want to mention it, or should we go on to find one?
Let's just go on to the one you liked.
So the one I liked that I pulled down off my shelf this week is called The Once and Future Gardener, Garden Writing from the Golden Age of Magazines, 1900 to 1940.
Ooh, cool.
Edited with an introduction by Virginia Tuttle Clayton and published in 1999. Good use copies still available, as they say. And I didn't check my library because I have a copy. But it's the perfect summertime reading. And Dee, it's just like putting a book in my hand and saying, which rabbit hole would you like to go down now, Miss Carol? So it is charming writing. It's just different, is all I can say. And so it is probably going to take me down more than rabbit holes, but that's okay. It's just the kind of book you can open it, find a section, and, you never know what you'll discover. And so that, to me, that's the perfect book. You just, no expectation, but you'll find something delightful. And there's nothing, it's not going to be, I don't want to say anything about books written today, but it's going to be delightful. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think the writing was, now, let's just put it this way. The writing now is for clarity, and online writing is written for search engines. Not my blog, not your blog, because we just do whatever we want to do. But right. The stuff we write for Family Handyman, for example, is just very straightforward. And so,
well, that kind of writing though has its place because, if you're standing there and you need quick information, like they said, you can just scroll down through your phone and it's like, here it is.
Right.
I'm not the fluff.
I'm not dissing it at all. I'm just saying if I'm going to sit down and read something, I want it to be a little more, like I just finished reading Kristen Lavren's Daughter. It took me, it's really 3 books. It was 1,194 pages. And I thought, I am never going to get through it, but I did. And then the ending ended up making it worthwhile. The whole thing I read. And I like that kind of writing periodically. Now I need to read an Aunt Dimity to balance it out because my head hurts from this. But
Aunt Dimity would definitely balance that out. Definitely. Have you gotten the first book yet?
Well, I borrowed it from the library, and I didn't have time to read it because I was reading Kristen on my trip. So I took that giant book with me on the plane, and people kept looking at me like I was crazy. But our plane got messed up yesterday, and we got in 2 hours late. So I had plenty of time to read, and I finished it last night. So glad I took it. Well, that's
good. But gives you a sense of accomplishment to finish a book that thick.
It does, and it was a very good story. It's just it was translated from Norwegian. That's
And so if somebody's listening to this for the first time, I will include a link to the Aunt Dimity books so they'll know what are they talking about? Aunt Dimity books?
yes,
Cozy, beyond cozy mysteries.
right. They're
So
really
anyway,
fun.
we don't have a brand new book. We will in a couple of weeks. So Dee, do that next quote.
Yeah, we've got some books coming. It is not how busy you are, but why you are busy. The bee is praised, the mosquito is swatted. Mary O'Connor. Okay, Mary O'Connor, that one's awesome. Because I'm telling you, yeah, mosquitoes, yuck.
So the dirt, I found this a couple of weeks ago, and it's on a website called science.org. And they have an article from 2020 where they said that bumblebees make plants flower early by cutting holes in their leaves.
So that makes really good sense.
Yeah.
Because
So they stress the plant out
right.
so the plant will flower earlier.
Because there are people who root prune their tomato plants right before it's supposed to get cold, because it tells the plant to put on more blooms and try to make tomatoes, because it thinks that it's gotten cold. And so it stresses the plant out. And this is the same idea. They want them to bloom. And so they chew holes in their leaves. You know what? Nature is so complicated.
It is. And this was a chance discovery in a greenhouse. And then they thought, why are the bees putting holes in the leaves of these plants? And then they did some studies. So they made the bees really hungry and then stuck them in a contained location with these plants. And they saw them make the little holes. And then those plants, they said, bloomed 17 days earlier than the other plants, which bloomed after, that weren't having the holes eaten, which bloomed after 33 days. So it is fascinating, and we'll include a link to that. That's kind of our dirt is, and why we have all these bee quotes, I guess, today. Did people notice it was all bee quotes? Mm-hmm. Anyway, that was a fascinating article, and we will leave a link to it. So if you see holes in the middle of your plants, leaves, maybe a bee did it.
Maybe a bee, maybe a caterpillar, maybe a leafcutter bee. It could be a lot of things. So, you ready for the next quote?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. Bee to the blossom, moth to the flame, each to his passion. What's in a name? Helen Hunt Jackson.
So our rabbit holes.
Yeah, you went down quite the rabbit hole of a documentary.
It was quite the rabbit hole, and it might be why we also have bee quotes. I finally watched the movie Honeyland on Hulu. Honeyland it came a while back. There was a trailer, and that trailer for Honeyland is very intriguing. It shows a woman calling the bees, and she lives in a place called Macedonia, which was once part of Yugoslavia. And she is the last of the nomadic beekeepers. And so she lives without roads, electricity, or running water. And really, it's about her life and how she uses the honey to be able to buy food for her family, which is her mother. And she has a very small garden. I mean, this place is dry. This place is remote. She lives 4 hours walk away from the nearest city.
Wow.
in the show. So in moves this family next door, across the street, and she kind of befriends them. You know, she's lonely and her mother's really sick and she's having to take care of her. I know how that is. So the man, whose name is Hussein Sam, he is intrigued by her beekeeping, which is done in a very natural way. And then he decides that he's going to be a beekeeper too. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because you need to watch it, what happens. It's just so typical of when we're greedy. It doesn't work so well. And so that documentary was very famous. It won the Sundance Film Festival. They spent 3 years making it, and it grossed over $1 million. And so that sent me down the rabbit hole about the ethics of documentaries. And there is a real debate, I guess is the right word, a real debate on the ethics of doing documentaries, especially with people who live in scarce circumstances. And if you make all this money off of them, what do you do? Well, in this case, I think there's two documentarians that did this. Long story short, they ended up helping this lady, and they found her a house in a different part of Macedonia that was closer to town, because her life was really hard, and they felt guilty for all that they made. But you don't want to ruin somebody's life either.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's complicated.
Nothing corrupts like money.
So they did buy her a house. They got her in a different area. I don't know if she still keeps bees or not. She probably does. She did it all her whole life. It was just very fascinating. And that stuff that I just told you is not in the documentary. I just went and got down the rabbit hole because I wondered what happened to her.
Uh-huh.
Because it sort of ends and you don't know. Anyway, so what was your rabbit hole about?
So I posted about another lost lady of garden writing last week, and then I spent far too much time researching another one. Got myself all confused. You know, I'm doing better at keeping notes and track of where I've been. But
right,
one site says the woman was twice married, and every reference to her in the newspaper is Miss, not Mrs., which is unusual for the early 20th century, that they didn't take their married name. So then I'm trying to think, maybe there are two, because her name's common, not that common. Anyway, and at one point, like, her daughter married name was the same as her married name, supposedly, and it's just kind of confusing. But I posted about Mrs. Frances King, who was an author and the editor of all those other books that I've been talking about, the Little Garden series.
Yes.
Super easy to find. All of her papers and stuff are at the Central Michigan University, although they spell her name wrong on the page about her, Louisa without the O. Who knew?
Why?
I don't know. It's just like this huge
terrible
typo, and I was trying to find a contact so I could say, could you please correct the spelling of her name? But I found a blogger called Garden Moxie that I didn't know about, who's in Michigan, and she actually went to the garden or the house and garden where Mrs. King gardened in the 1920s. So I've put a link to that in my post. So I'll link to my whole post. And that kind of wraps up the Little Gardens series, by the way. Mrs. King is the end of it, because I'm not going to do the two men that wrote books, because they're not lost ladies.
No, they're not.
So, like I said, I'll leave a blog post, and then I got to figure out this other one. And by the way, she's as much a children's author as a garden writer. And she's not the one you told me about. It's a whole different one.
Oh boy.
I don't know what I'm doing with it, but it just shows how Ancestry.com can be wrong, and websites can be wrong, and newspaper clippings. And so I'm trying to make it so that it's like, this is correct information. It was in the newspaper, which weirdly enough, what I think was her son-in-law died, because one obituary listed what I think is her daughter as the wife, but another obituary of the same time period listed somebody else as the wife. So I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, too big of a rabbit hole, too much time down there. That's it.
I found that in my own family, because I went and did some research on my dad's family recently on Ancestry. And of course, you're in a bunch of other family trees when you do that. And I'm like, wait a minute, you guys have all these names wrong. And sometimes the newspaper has it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And it'll just be like, for example, my great-grandmother's name is Texas Lily. That's her name. And it was Lillie. Okay, that was her actual given name. Her first name was Texas. Her middle name was Lily. It's all messed up. I mean, people have it every which way. And a lot of it's due to mistakes in the newspaper or mistakes on the census, because they just wrote stuff down. Sometimes the grave marker is the best, because that's the family, and the family gets the names right.
I couldn't find grave markers for this woman. It's a bit of a mess. And so I might just write the blog post and say, it's a bit of a mess. But,
I think that's fair. That's fair. So, should we go on to garden commissions now?
We should. So this week, I'm going to fertilize all my containers again. do more weeding. I need to wade into the perennial border that I call Plopper's Field. It is a mess needs deadheading and weeding. Definitely a long pants job to get in there. And I just start weeding and deadheading and throwing everything off into the lawn and then figure out what goes in the compost, what goes in the trash. And of course, I will once again be watering because once again, it is not raining. How about your garden, Dee?
All this whining about no rain.
What? I am not whining. I'm simply stating facts.
I'm going to put in a new border. Guess what I'm going to plant in it?
Would daylilies be the correct answer?
Yeah, in the fall. So I'm not going to work on that this week, but I'm going to be putting one in pretty soon. It's on the other side of the brick walkway next to the wall. Let's see. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I've got all these daylilies that are resting in my sink, about 10 of them, and I'm going to put them in the pots in the shade, which we talked about earlier. And then I also need to go outside when it's not blazing hot in the morning and do some trimming up because all those daylily scapes have to be cut back, and I've got some articles to write, a blog post about the meeting, and I'm speaking in Tulsa next week on Monday and Tuesday. What a busy week I have.
You have a busy week, indeed. And that's it. Thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every Wednesday at 12 midnight Eastern Time.
I see that Carol changed our wrap up. If you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your gardening friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our new Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist, at substack.com, also linked to in our show notes.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission. It costs you zip. Nothing. Nada.
Yet. It was lovely to chat with you over the garden gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.